Had it been you instead of Jesus, who had been raised from the dead, how do you think you would have made your presence known to the disciples? How would you have chosen to reveal yourself to your friends? How would you have made your entrance? Perhaps this? And I think there's probably a few here for whom this is what you would imagine. Because remember, the disciples were so heartbroken, they couldn't even imagine that Jesus was alive. So maybe some of you would be like this. There's suddenly a hush over the whole land, kind of like a total eclipse, right? Things get dark for a moment. Suddenly you can't tell where, but there's music somewhere or everywhere. And even in the darkness, there's a bright, shining light somewhere. It just gets brighter and brighter. And then suddenly there's a clap of thunder, and then, right then, there you are. Oh my gosh, people are cheering and weeping. It's so awesome. And that was not how Jesus did it. Again, we hear another one of those appearances of Jesus after the resurrection. But his were all so ordinary. The boys were fishing. He shows up. Have a bite. Mary went to anoint his body at the tomb. He's standing in the garden. He didn't call out to her. She didn't recognize him until he said her name. Or two disciples who were just walking along the way, and he just walked with them and entered into the conversation. There's a little group having a bite to eat on the seashore, and he joins them and gets a bite to eat with them. His appearances were so simple and ordinary and humble. He doesn't stop the sun in the sky or cue up the music or clap of thunder, any of those things some of us might have done. He just shows up and walks with them, often unrecognized. Here's why that's so important. Because it's not only how he did it back then, it's how he still does it today. Jesus does show up, but it's nothing dramatic. And it takes us having eyes and hearts and ears open to recognize and to see. Now, if you've been someone who's heard me preach for years, you might have noticed that it seems like every year or two, I find myself saying this sentence again because it's so important, I think. It's the answer to the question about our lives. How does God show up in our lives? The answer is a 6-word sentence. How does God show up for us? God comes disguised as our lives. I'll say it again. How does God show up for us? God comes disguised as our lives in the regular, ordinary mix of it all. If our eyes and hearts are open, then maybe in that conversation, or that meal, or driving, or planning, our job is to remind ourselves to be awake to that presence, not wait till something dramatic would happen, because we might just keep waiting. It's just not how Jesus does it. And one of the greatest gifts of our faith is to see that God has chosen to create a world, and this is amazing, a world where the ordinary holds the extraordinary. A world where the human holds the divine. Often we miss it. Our minds are so busy with the next thing. Or sometimes we're back somewhere in the past, lamenting or idealizing or planning or rushing around or whatever, that we just don't notice. But God shows up. God shows up this very day. As perhaps you know, there are a number of young folks here who are preparing for confirmation. We'll have a little bit of a run through later. We're glad that you're here. A couple of things. After confirmation, I don't know that you will necessarily feel different. You might feel a little bit, but maybe. But often not. It's not quite as exhilarating as the competition when you're playing Fortnite or Minecraft or whatever, right? But if you are about the practice of learning to see, you will be different. If your heart is at all open to invite God anew, to walk with you and to be in you and to work through you, you will be different. And I'm glad you're here today. And one of the reasons this is a good thing to do on a regular basis is because this is a school unlike any other school. This is a school that teaches us to see what is most real. I'll say it again. This is a school unlike any other school. This is where we learn how to see and to hear and to feel what is most real. For when we gather, in the gathering itself, if our hearts are open, Christ shows up. Remember, the human holds the divine. And if we're ready to listen, we have a God who speaks here, today. And so the ordinary holds the extraordinary, bread and wine. In just a moment, they will hold for us the divine. Where two or three are gathered in my name, Jesus said, I am there. He is here right now, which is why we have invited you several times in your preparation, and I'll say it again, and parents and godparents, please encourage this. And you guys, please encourage to get a ride here. This is good to come on a regular basis. It's good for your souls. You will learn how to see and hear and feel what is most real. And when this mass is over, Christ will not stop showing up. I'd love to hear, next time you see me, if you really had your hearts open, when did you notice that later today, or even during this Mass? Christ does come. It's not dramatic, but Christ does. Now, had it been me, I probably wouldn't have wanted it to be tremendously dramatic, but just, I hope it would have been kind of cool, just maybe a little bit more dramatic than the way Jesus did it, a little bit of the, and then people would go, he's here, this is so great. But I'm not Jesus, and you have many reasons to be thankful that that's true. And the ways that Jesus chooses to come then and now are much more humble. Jesus chose to come that way then so that we might learn to recognize him when he comes that way now.